Hello there, and welcome to the How to Market Your Horse Business podcast. I'm so glad you're joining me here today. My name is Denise Alvarez. I get the pleasure of hosting you here. And before we dive into the guest I have for you today, which you are going to love, I'm going to quickly introduce myself just in case we're new friends, and then we'll dive right in. Now, as I said, my name is Denise, and through my business, Storm Lily Marketing, I get to help dream-chasing horse business owners to ditch the overwhelm, get the clarity they've been craving, and grow their equine business in a way that meets their definition of success. Now, I do this primarily through business coaching and then education, such as this podcast, and I have some online learning resources for you as well. But all that I do, friends, truly is so that you, as an equestrian entrepreneur, can be out doing what you love to do, whether it's in the barn, the arena, behind the camera lens, behind the computer, making the gear, wherever it is that you are serving the equine industry. I want to help you do more of that. And so here on the podcast specifically, you'll get a mix of step-by-step strategies, essential how-tos, and entrepreneurial mindset shifts that will help you not only see what's possible for your business, but I'm also here to guide you through that process so you can make it happen. And today we're doing that by way of talking about the legalities. Now, do not turn this off just because you've heard that, okay? First of all, Polly Hay is a businesswoman, but she's also a horsewoman. She's also an attorney specifically for equine businesses. So she gets you. And the reason this is so important, and I don't want you turning this episode off, is because I know that many equestrian entrepreneurs are operating on verbal agreements or handshake deals or templates that were found online years ago, but aren't specifically geared toward your business. I know that you're focused on working in your business, but this is one of those things when it comes to working on your business and getting yourself set up and protected legally that's going to help you do more of what you love to do, which is what I just told you I'm so passionate about. And so it is so important that we have these conversations. And thankfully, there are some practical ways that you, as an equine business owner, can protect yourself from some of the risk involved in not only owning your own business, but specifically owning an equine business. And especially for those of you who are working with horses and who are helping others to be with horses, the additional risk of that, we're going to talk about what that looks like and how you can minimize that risk and protect yourself and your equine business. Now, as I said, Polly Hay is an equine attorney. She's also a lifelong horsewoman and an author, and we'll talk about her book as well. But she grew up in the barn, so she gets the industry from both the legal and the horse world perspective. So what you're going to get today will be stories and strategies that every business owner in the equine space needs to hear. She's going to share with you 5 essential steps that you can take to reduce your liability. And she's going to talk you through some of the questions that you should be asking along the way, including agreements and contracts and how to protect yourself long term. All right, so I hope I've convinced you to stay tuned to meet Polly. You're going to really appreciate the practicality of this episode and how she breaks things down. Now, of course, I do need to give a disclaimer because Polly is an attorney. And so this podcast does feature attorney Polly Hay of Hay and Hay Attorneys at Law. She is licensed to practice law in California and Tennessee, as you will hear her share. So the content of this podcast is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute legal advice, and listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. For legal advice specific to your situation, please consult a qualified attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. All right, now that that is all taken care of, I would love for you to join me in this conversation and meet Polly Hay. Here we go. Okay, Polly, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it, and I cannot wait for my listeners to get to know you.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Denise. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, likewise. I know, man, equestrian entrepreneurs would probably be able to pick your brain with so many questions. So I've picked just a few that I think will be helpful to them. But before we dive into the legal things, I would love to get to know you, and I'd love my audience to get to know you and more about your background and how you became to what you are doing now, which is an attorney really specializing in equine law, from what I understand. And with the book, I have your book here, and I'll make sure to link to it in the show notes. So you're also an author. So that's
Yeah.
super fun. So tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Sure. So I grew up as a trainer's kid. My mom was a hunter jumper trainer in the Bay Area in California. And she put me in front of her on the horse when I was 6 months old. And I just grew up at the barn. And I'm so lucky and blessed to have had that experience with horses and all of that. But throughout my time as a child and teenager, I saw horse transactions and things happen that didn't go as one would hope. And I had always had a dream of going to law school. My father is an attorney as well. And when I was in law school, I realized that I really wanted to figure out a way to combine my two passions, horses and the law. And my father was a deputy district attorney in Santa Clara County for over 30 years. And he had an opportunity to retire from that work. And we were able to open up our practice together back in 2006. And I've been practicing equine law ever since exclusively. One of the things I think is really important for your listeners, and really what I've learned, I think I saw growing up, but as I've been a practicing attorney, learned even more and more, is that there are so many issues within the horse industry that can be prevented just if people take the time to sort of think about them and do some planning. That's really what my book was meant to do, is just to educate people of, hey, these are some things you should be thinking about, whether you're brand new to the industry or you've maybe been in it, grown up in it like me. There's always things you can do. And I think the hardest thing over my career has been when someone finds me after there's a problem that I could have prevented if they had known about me ahead of time. Me or other attorneys, if they had just worked with someone ahead of time. So that's a little bit of background. I guess the other thing is I still ride. I have twins that are 16 years old, a boy and a girl, and they both ride. So, we do the hunter jumpers. And are at the barn pretty much every day. So, yeah, it's still a horse girl through and through.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And my goodness, with your mom being in that, like you said, you've seen the ins and outs of it for so long. And so many business owners and those that are listening are a mix of product based and service based. So some of them are trainers, some of them are photographers, some of them are providing equestrian products or gear. So there's a mix. And so either way, though, in the horse industry, oftentimes we hear like, I just operate on a handshake. And I literally just, in between when I booked our interview, in between today, I was reading an article and it was a stock contractor that's a pretty big stock contractor. And she even said in the article in her interview, like, the way my dad did it, the way I'm going to do it is, we operate on a handshake and that should be good enough. We don't need a written, people think we don't need anything written, as you said, until later on. So talk to me just from your experience about the risk involved for horse business owners when they're doing that and some of the things of why it's so important for them to consider maybe you should have a written document just from a legal standpoint.
Yeah, of course, oral agreements can be enforced, but what the terms there are can be super nebulous. And so it's having a written agreement, it puts everyone on notice ahead of time what you're agreeing to, what the expectations are. I think it just allows for transactions to most of the time go great. But when there is a problem, you have something to refer back to. We've had many cases over the years of, deals on a handshake, people buying, 7-figure horses even with nothing in writing. And you sort of pause and go, wait, what? Like, in what other industry would you buy something, whether it's $1,000 or $1 million, you just generally don't. Everything else, there's something in writing. And so I think one of the big advantages to having something in writing is that when something goes wrong, everyone knows what the terms were supposed to be. Everyone knows, things that we often put in, for instance, dispute resolution. Everyone knows how we're going to get this resolved if it doesn't turn out the way that we want. And your story of the article you were reading, I hear that all the time. And especially from trainers, well, I've been doing this and I've never had a problem. And back to my point is, yeah, you don't call me, unfortunately, until there's a problem. And we could have just prevented it by having a well-drafted contract.
Yeah. Well, and even as you're saying that, it's interesting because I think about people, so much of it is the relationship aspect, right? So when they're doing that, they're saying it's because I have a relationship with this person that would never happen to me. Until it does, right? But I feel like even when you're saying that, I'm kind of reminded of like the idea of a prenuptial agreement. And I'm not saying I'm pro or con. What I'm saying is sometimes it's just hearing that word automatically brings up defenses in a relationship. And I feel like that's what a lot of people are maybe afraid of when it comes to drafting an agreement between a client and customer is like, if I say that, then they're going to think I don't trust them. And so I'd rather just keep the relationship. How do you address that for them?
I like to tell clients, because I hear that, a lot. And I like to tell them that, look, we're not drafting a one-sided contract. We're not drafting something that if you're the trainer is only protecting you. We're drafting something that provides transparency so that everyone understands sort of what the expectations are, and it can actually enhance that client relationship and make it flow better because people know what to expect. I think unfortunately, sometimes, at least the trainer side of it, they get a bad rap because there has been a lot of published cases of, trainers in different disciplines taking advantage, that sort of thing, of clients. So in California, and I know your audience is national, but in California and Kentucky, they have the same law. We have a law, it's Business and Professions Code 19525, and it requires a written document for the sale of a horse over $500. It requires the written disclosure of any commissions paid, and it requires the written disclosure of dual agency. So if a trainer is representing both the buyer and the seller in a transaction. And the way that law, it was enacted in California in 2010, and we helped on a small scale with some of the lobbying and that sort of thing. And the way that law came about was that a very well-known lawyer and winemaker, Jess Jackson, owned racehorses. He was a partial owner in Curlin, and he was defrauded out of over $2.5 million of trainers taking double and triple commissions and him not knowing it. So he was paying 50% commissions on these horses, that sort of thing. And the case was down in San Diego County. And so he was able, because of his resources and whatnot, to really open up like, hey, this is happening industry-wide. It's not just racehorses. It's happening in hunter jumper horses. It's happening in the reining world. It's happening everywhere. And how do we protect the consumers, but at the same time protect the trainers? Because again, going back to my point, it is really beneficial for everyone to have something in writing so everyone knows sort of what the terms are. So, but to answer your question, I guess that's really my answer, is it really protects both sides. And that's how I try to talk to clients who might not want to have something in writing. And I will promise you that if they've done it on a handshake and it's gone bad, they won't ever do it on a handshake again. So, that's just the reality of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. It's protecting the relationship. I think that's so important. And so you are making the relationship a priority and giving that clarity. It's because it's funny as you're saying that I'm thinking in marketing, I talk often about we need to be clear on our customers, clear on our messaging, but I feel like what you're offering is clarity for your client customer relationship. So there's no second guessing. And like you said, what happens when there is a problem or whose responsibility is this? Now that this horse is facing this, diagnosis, where's the responsibility line? What are you going to do about that? And it gives that clarity, which when you have that protects the relationship as well. So I think that's so important. But also, obviously, it reduces their liability, right? And as a business owner and as people who are trying to run a profitable business, you want to reduce their liability. So knowing that, I know that you've put together some practical things for them to take away, those who are listening today. So what are some practical ways that equestrian business owners can reduce their liability?
Yeah. So I've done a webinar on this and touch on it in my book as well. Sort of 5 tips that people can do today after listening. And one is to have a business entity, whether that's a limited liability company or a corporation. And I think the key thing here is because I do get a lot of clients who say, oh, yeah, I formed that on LegalZoom or whatnot. But you've got to make sure that it's been formed properly. We've had cases where either there's no bylaws or operating agreement, or they're just something you get off the internet and then not specific to the situation. And so making sure that you have an entity is one way to create another layer between your personal assets and a business lawsuit, right? So I often talk about an onion or a layered approach, put as many layers between your home, your family's wealth, and any sort of lawsuit. Because at the end of the day, it's horses. They're unpredictable. Things are going to happen. You can work with me, but I can't stop the horse from bucking someone off, right? But we can put you in a better position if that does happen. So not just liability from falling off, but even, there's lawsuits over horse sales and that sort of thing as well. So having a business entity and making sure you form it correctly is the first one. The next
Can I'm going to
Sure.
pause you with a
Sure.
question. So on that one, when you're talking to people, are there resources like correct? Forgive me if the way I'm going to ask this, okay? So some people are going to be intimidated or financially like going, "Oh, how much is that going to cost me though?" That's the scary part, which yes, it's an investment and it's the same as getting a website or all those things. You have to be willing to invest in your business. But for those people who are listening and like, "Okay, I'm kind of nervous because I did what she said. I did the online thing." And so what's the practical next step for them? Like, is it like if you want to do it correctly, you have to work with an attorney? Is it just working with your accountant who does it for you? Give them like okay, then what if we need to fix
Sure.
it?
Yeah, so if you've done it and then you're not sure if you have the bylaws or the operating agreement, it's not too late, number one. You can amend those, or if you don't have them at all, draft them at a later date. I would suggest working with an attorney, especially because I think within the horse industry, it's so specific. So you want those documents specifically drafted to what it is you're doing, which most businesses in the horse industry are very different from uh, obviously like running a restaurant or something like that, So um, certainly you can amend those and work with someone who can help you with that. I will also want to do a caveat there. If you have a business partner, that's where it's even more critical to make sure that that agreement is well drafted, because what that agreement can do is provide you with what happens if you guys decide to terminate the business. We had a case where 2 people that have worked together for a really long time decided it was time to go separate ways, and they didn't have any dissolution provisions in there. Actually, they didn't have a um, operating agreement, unfortunately, but they had. So without any dissolution provisions, it was sort of okay, well, now how do we dissolve this in a fair way? And usually when people decide to dissolve a business, things have gone south a little bit. And so it ended up with both sides with attorneys, and both of us, myself and this other attorney, talking about equipment and, okay, who should get which buckets? Like, really? Like, buckets are, I don't know, $20. Like, you don't want to be paying me to talk about who gets this
Right?
right of bucket, So to the point of you can prevent it. So I understand it's an investment up front, but it's especially if you have any sort of business partnership, it's well worth the investment to make sure that if things change, you are set up properly. Working with your accountant certainly can help setting up the tax part of it. But what I'm really talking about is more beyond just the financial part of it.
Okay, thank you. Super helpful. Thanks for letting me jump in on there.
Sure. Yeah.
All
Please feel
right.
free to jump in anytime.
What's your second one?
Having a strong release of liability waiver. So in California, and this really applies if you're in California or Maryland. California and Maryland do not have an equine liability statute. And so what that means is there's no automatic protection for trainers and boarding stables and property owners if someone falls off on your property. So to get the same protections that 48 other states have, you have to have a document that complies with California law, and you need to have it signed by the parents or legal guardians, ideally both of them, to get any of those protections. Now, releases are upheld in California. I think sometimes people think, oh, because they don't have a statute, there's no protection. It's not that there's no protection. It's just that you have to take extra steps to get that protection. So many of your listeners probably come onto their horse property and they see a sign that says you're entering a horse property governed by X statute. We don't have those signage rules in California because we don't have that statute. I will say for people in other states where you do have that, still reading that statute, making sure that whatever the requirements, each state is different of that statute and you're complying with them. We helped a client one time, they were asking about another state where we're not licensed, but we were just sort of reviewing what it was, and the sign itself didn't even match the statute. So, and someone had bought it off of Amazon. So making sure if you're on one of those other sites, if you have a sign that it's referencing the correct statute, that it hasn't been updated, that sort of thing is really important.
Okay, that's so interesting. And even that, for those who do have the sign and that are not in Maryland and California, do they typically, and you typically advise them, still have your own liability forms that people are signing?
So I'm licensed in California and Tennessee only.
Okay.
So for my clients in Tennessee, yes, we've drafted release of liability that even though they have the statute, just to have another layer of protection there.
Okay.
But I can't speak. I would say if you're in one of those other states, whether or not you need that would really be state specific. So speaking to someone licensed in your state and or even getting online and reading that statute yourself. Most of those signs have a reference, so you could Google it and then, make sure that it all matches up.
Okay, perfect. Yes. And I guess I should have, and I'll put this, I'm sure, on the show notes, like she's not giving legal advice, right? We have to have that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
understand. We have to clarify that for everybody listening. You were saying this as someone giving that experience, but yes, to take action on what Polly is saying, talk to an attorney to get super clear. You can say whatever protection you need to say there, but I realized I should have made that very clear. This is a helpful conversation though. So thank you for leaning into that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
All right. What do you have for us? What's our third one?
Yes. So the next one is to have well-drafted, customized contracts. I know we talked about this with the handshake part at the beginning. I felt like that we were probably leaning a little bit more towards talking about sales and lease and agreements, and obviously those are super important. But there's a lot of other contracts that you should consider if you're in the industry. So if you own a horse property, making sure that your boarding agreement complies with your state's law, making sure that certain provisions in it, again, termination, that's a big one that you want to have. What happens if someone stops paying? What are your remedies? If you have a horse property, you have an obligation to keep feeding and watering a horse, regardless if someone stops paying. And so what can you do? We've run into this a lot of times with clients here in California. And in California, we have something called an adjuster's lien. But so making sure that your boarding contract addresses those types of situations is important. Another big one, I think, on the trainer side is if you own a horse property, having an agreement with the trainer that's using your property, what the rules are, how can they use the property. At the end of the day, this is oftentimes your home as well as your business. And you want to make sure that it's operating in the way that you want it to. And going back to that, why a handshake with the trainer, this is where I see a lot of those handshake deals also is, oh, well, this is our child's trainer. We want them to run the business. We want it to be friendly. And again, that's all great until there's a problem, either with that trainer or with one of their customers. And how do you address it? Whereas if you've just sat down and talked about it ahead of time, you would know how it's going to be addressed. I'll give you one more important contract that I think, in case you have any trainers that listen to your podcast, and that's their agreement that they have with their clients. This, I think, obviously, I see a lot of trainers with like, oh, I have a price sheet. So they know what they're going to get paid. And maybe that includes a late fee or something like that. But there's a lot of other things you can address with your clients that can be beneficial. So, one is horse show attendance. Depending on the discipline, horse shows are thousands of dollars sometimes. And the trainers put their time and their own money out so that you can take your child to this horse show. And if you, as the client, cancel at the last minute because you decide you want to go on vacation, or you have something else that you just decide you're going to do, the trainer ends up oftentimes taking the economic loss. So addressing that in a trainer agreement so that, again, everyone knows up front, hey, if you cancel 2 weeks before the horse show, then you're on the hook for these fees. And then you keep your clients happy too. So it goes back also to that client relationship. Then it's everyone can, knows the things. And if they want to go on a vacation and they understand they're going to pay this much, like sort of as a fee for that, that's fine. So that's the next one.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I wish I could remember the conversation I was having with somebody about that exact thing. And what actually ends up happening too, back to protecting that relationship, and I'm sure you've seen it, is just resentment builds up. To be honest, it turns into like you as the trainer resenting your clients when if you would have said, you know what, this is my business, this is how I'm going to run the business, this is the way it is from the beginning, then that relationship is protected and they knew ahead of time and they made that choice, but you don't have the fallout. So therefore you don't have the resentment. And it really, again, I hope people listening will understand, like, I understand your fears around it, but what's the benefit on the other side is so much better. Like you're going to enjoy what you're doing so much more. You're going to, you're going to really get to do more of the things that you love because you don't have so much of that tension that's there otherwise.
Right. Exactly. It makes that whole relationship be much smoother. And you might, if you're a trainer and you don't have anything like that, you might be thinking, oh, well, what about the push? I don't want to lose clients like right when I, roll this out, so to speak. And I will be honest, I've worked with a lot of trainers and I don't think I've ever had anyone lose a client because you ask them to sign something, because most of what you're asking them to sign is what you're already doing, right? You're not coming up with some new crazy thing. And if you do decide to come up with some new plan, new payment plan, new late fee, whatever that is, then it's your business. You should, you give notice, okay, here, this is what we're going to sign 30 days, and this is going into effect, that sort of thing. So yeah, it really does help protect the relationships.
Well, and as you said 30 days, that made me think too of the other thing that I'm sure that you encourage people to include in those agreements would be like, what happens if you decide you're no longer going to use the services? Because this happens even in just like for digital businesses, right? For me, like in my agreements, it's like, hey, we have an ongoing coaching relationship. If you cancel within X number of days, this is what it'll look like. If you don't, then here's what it'll look like. It protects, again, both of us. So same thing, I have talked to clients who have been like, well, they left. And they gave me like a week's notice and now I don't have this boarding income because 3 horses left and I wasn't prepared for that. So I'm guessing that would be a part of what you would say, hey, we need to include in there that kind of conversation too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I usually recommend 30 days on either side. Obviously we include provisions if I'm drafting a boarding agreement or a training agreement that if a horse becomes dangerous, then you as the stable owner or the trainer have the ability to get that person to leave sooner. But 30 days, I would say, is pretty standard. Another important one too is if you own a horse property and you have both an agreement with the trainer who's using your property as well as boarding agreements with the boarders, you want to make sure that those termination clauses are the same. We had a case where a trainer had a training agreement with a property and they had to give 60 days notice to terminate their ability to use the property. But their clients all signed boarding agreements that only had 30 days notice. So the clients went and gave 30 days notice, and then the trainer, they couldn't actually if their clients left, there was no way they could run their business there. So as you can imagine, it's things like that it could have just easily been prevented and not involved an attorney if someone had just been looking and saying, okay, these match, this makes sense, that sort of thing. So making sure that if you have multiple different types of documents, those types of termination clauses are all in sync.
That's so good. I hadn't even thought about that. I love that. I love the practical, like the real life application of that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. What else do you have?
Yeah. Next, fourth is insurance. I talk about insurance all day long with clients and potential clients, not because I get anything from insurance companies or anything like that, but going back to that like layered approach I talked about, it's another layer of protection between you and a lawsuit or something bad happening. So if you're owning a horse property, You're going to want liability insurance that protects you if someone falls off and gets injured on your property. You're going to want property insurance. You're going to also want something called care, custody, and control insurance. So that's the insurance that covers you if a horse is injured on your property. It's a place where I often see people underinsured because maybe their business started small and they only had 3 or 4 horses and the horses weren't that expensive. But as their business grew, they got more horses and more expensive horses, but they never went back and, upped that insurance. So making sure that you have enough care, custody, and control insurance is really important. If you're trailering horses, making sure that uh, your regular auto insurance probably not going to cover your trailering for the business, so making sure you have the right type of insurance there is really important. And then the one other one I want to point out for your listeners, because I think it's often sort of forgotten about, is personal horse owner's liability insurance. So this isn't for the business owner. This is for the individual um, who might own one horse, and maybe they're either it's just their horse and they're riding it, or they've decided to lease it out. And this is the insurance that would cover them if their horse kicked someone and broke their leg, and then that person sues them because of the horse's behavior. So it's relatively inexpensive. I mean, horse things are expensive, but in the scheme of things, it's relatively inexpensive for a good amount of coverage. And along those same lines, almost always your regular home insurance policies like State Farm, Allstate, those types of things do not cover horse-related incidents. We had a case at the beginning of my career where a client was buying their first horse. They went to their Allstate agent. He sold, and they said, "We want protection if something happened, our horse hurt someone." He sold them a $5 million umbrella on their home policy. Tragically, the horse ended up killing someone. It was a terrible accident. They went back to Allstate and said, "Okay, well, we need to turn this over to our insurance." And the agent looked through and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. There's an exclusion for horses in your policy." And this happens all the time. And there's lots of case law on it. So making sure that you have insurance if you own a horse that's going to protect you if that horse hurts someone is really important.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's a good eye opener for people to hear. And I think most people understand oftentimes the need for it, but it's the nuances of what you just described that's so helpful.
Right.
So, again, the benefit of working with a specialist who knows what they're talking about in the horse world is just invaluable because there are things that other people just aren't going to know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, and then my last thing that I think is really important for people who are working in the industry is to do regular audits of how your business is running, audits of your insurance, audits of your contracts, making sure that they're all up to date. Like I was talking about a little bit earlier with the care, custody, and control insurance. Um, when we've done these audits for clients, we get into it and go, whoa, there's all these, oh, you have the wrong people named here, on the insurance part, or you don't have enough, or what is this? Like you work with Girl Scouts and oh no, that was 4 years ago, but you've been paying, for extra coverage for that, just the
Mhm.
little examples, or, the boarding contract just falls out of date because they do things differently. So as your business changes, you want to make sure you're updating all of that as well. So to keep yourself safe as you're moving through the industry.
Yeah. Okay, that's so good. All right, I have a question for you, Polly. For those listening, they're like, okay, well, I don't live in California or Tennessee, so Polly's off the table for me. Is there an easy way to find attorneys that can help you that are specialized in this, or is it really just down to a Google search and finding the right website that says I'm an equine attorney?
Unfortunately, there's not a super easy, you could look them up all one place. Certainly happy to make referral. I do obviously know equine attorneys in some states. So happy to refer those if I know them. But oftentimes doing a Google search, equine law, equestrian law, and the state can be helpful. Probably going to bar association is not going to be helpful because beyond our horse world, you tell people that and they go, "What is it you do?" They don't understand that. So,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, so probably, unfortunately, Google search with equine law or equestrian law in your area is probably the best way to do that. So,
Okay. Yeah. And hopefully, maybe for those listening, they can get some personal referrals from others that have worked with others in their states or their area. And of course, we have many active Facebook groups in the horse world. So I'm
Exactly.
sure
Yeah.
that may be a good place with those referrals and getting your book. Like, I really appreciate that you have taken the time to put something in print to help people that, again, clearly they need to work with an attorney to get the specifics of their agreements, but just to get that understanding. Again, as a business owner, there are certain things that if you're going to treat it like a business and not a hobby, then you need to invest in. And it's going to protect you and it's going to give you the room to grow and feel safe and growing, like going to give you some of that freedom, which I think is so important.
Yeah, no, and I really hope that the book gets people thinking about the questions to ask, whether you're in California or Massachusetts or any state. The book itself is, while I might reference California law once or twice in there, it's really meant to be a resource for people all over the country. And then, from there, they might read through it and go, oh, I should go have this conversation with my trainer, or I need to, or maybe I do want to talk to an attorney. But it's really meant to get people, especially new families to the industry, thinking about sort of, hey, here's the risks, here's what could happen. Let's make sure it doesn't happen by planning ahead. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that was really my goal with the book. There's also, I don't know if you had an opportunity to download any of the checklists, but there's QR codes at the back of the book where you can download checklists, like one to go take and be able to talk to your trainer, that sort of thing. So, we tried to make it as user friendly as possible.
Yeah, I love that. Like I said, all about the practical application. So that's a lovely way to do that. So I will definitely link to that in the show notes so everybody can easily access it. But for those listening who are wanting to take quick action, Polly, I'd love for you to share how they can connect with you or find you online.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So our website is Blue Ribbon Law, BLUERIBBONLAW.com. And if you email us, my email is polly@blueribbonlaw.com. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I think that's it. So yeah, and I will say, I think our Instagram and Facebook, actually, and LinkedIn now too, we've really been trying to post a lot of educational content to get it out so that people just can. It's a sort of an expansion of the book, so people can get little snippets of what they should be thinking about and all of that. That's really my goal with the social media part. So we also have a YouTube channel, so you can check out videos that I've recorded there as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for the way you're serving the industry and the extra mile that you're doing now to educate horse business owners and horse owners in general. I know you are helping lots of people in horses. So thank you for that.
Okay. Thanks so much, Denise.
Okay, wasn't that so good? I'm so very grateful for Polly and her heart to help equine business owners. And so I do want to make sure you know that all the links and things will be on the show notes for you, and it is for episode 181. So if you go to stormlily, LILY.com/181. Sorry, let me make that more clear. Storm, LILY. Sometimes people question that one. .com/181. You can get to the show notes. You'll have everything you need there. And so I want to make sure you remember this conversation and these steps that Polly shared are not about fear. They're really about freedom. When you have the right protections in place, you can run your horse business with more confidence and clarity. You can focus on what you love, teaching, training, caring for horses, without constantly worrying about what could go wrong. It's really truly not about expecting the worst or thinking the worst about other people. It's just about being prepared so you can build a sustainable equine business that lasts. And you know that is my heart for you here on the podcast. So get your things in place that you need to get done. Make this the year that you stop winging it and start putting the right structures in place to set you up for long-term success in your equine business. All right, friends, I thank you so much for joining me here. I hope you'll stay tuned. We've got more new episodes coming your way in the coming weeks. So if you are not subscribed to the podcast, hit subscribe wherever it is that you love to listen to podcasts, and I'll continue to meet you here with new episodes. And before you go, if you have not yet gotten my free guide, I want to invite you to get that. It is the steps to success in your equine business, remembering that success is subjective to each individual business owner. So if you go to Storm Lily, again, storm, LILY.com/success, you can get that free guide. It's going to give you step-by-step the things you need to get in place so that you can feel confident in your marketing and build your successful equine business. All right, friends, thanks again for joining me here. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you back here soon.